Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, June 1st, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kim Mo-kyun. Before we begin, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. The 2021 P4G Seoul Summit came to an end on Monday. More than 60 global leaders and heads of international organizations vowed to increase efforts against climate change. They also adopted the Seoul Declaration. South Korea's health authorities are giving some incentives to people who have been vaccinated. Beginning today, those who've had their first doses can meet up for gatherings of immediate family members beyond the current limit of 8 people. And the WHO has labeled COVID-19 variants with new names using the Greek alphabet according to the order of their detection. So far, 4 variants, which are considered strains of concern, will now be known using their new names. Top story this morning, the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit came to an end on Monday following a 2-day run. More than 60 global leaders and heads of international organizations gathered for the virtual summit to coordinate efforts against climate change. At the end, they adopted the Seoul Declaration. Our senior Blue House correspondent Kim Min-ji starts us off.
President Moon Jae-in, as the host of the P4G Seoul Summit, said the event helped unite the will of the international community to realize inclusive green recovery toward carbon neutrality. The curtain came down on the 2-day virtual summit on Monday with the adoption of the Seoul Declaration, urging sustainable and green efforts in the fight against climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic.
정상들은 기후 위기가 환경 문제만이 아니라 경제, 사회, 안보, 인권에 영향을 미치는 문제라는 데 동의하고 코로나19 역시 녹색 회복을 통해 극복해 나가야 한다는 데 인식을 같이 했습니다.
In the 14-point statement, the leaders also agreed to further strengthen cooperation to realize the goals of the Paris Agreement, namely to limit global warming to close to 1.5 degrees Celsius. They also encouraged countries to submit their enhanced goals for reducing emissions before the UN Climate Change Conference in November. In that respect, the participants agreed to promote a transition to renewable energy, while phasing out existing coal projects and ending financing for the overseas construction of coal power plants. The declaration also included a clause noting the severity of marine pollution and the need for global solidarity to address the issue. The leaders said they will not leave anyone behind, taking into account different national circumstances, as well as socially and environmentally vulnerable communities, and supporting a green transition in developing countries.
지금까지의 국제사회 노력에 더해져 이번 회의를 통해 강화된 민관 협력이 다가오는 11월 제26차 기후변화 당사국 총회를 성공적으로 이끌 것이라고 확신합니다.
The P4G Summit was the first multilateral meeting related to the environment that South Korea has ever hosted, bringing together more than 60 heads of state, senior government officials, and leaders of international organizations. Seoul now passes the baton to Bogota, which will host the next P4G Summit in 2023. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Prior to the closing ceremony, President Moon Jae-in chaired the leaders' session for live discussions on green recovery, carbon neutrality, and public-private partnerships. The speakers included leaders of high-level officials from Denmark, Colombia, the U.S., and the EU. Hong Yu reports.
The role developed countries should play for an inclusive green recovery was defined on Monday during the leaders' dialogue session. President Moon Jae-in, who chaired the live session as the host, said there are no borders when it comes to climate change, and therefore it's important to cooperate and understand each nation's respective economic and social conditions.
기후기술센터 네트워크 협력사무소와 녹색기술센터를 통해 개발도상국의 친환경 기술을 확보할 수 있도록 돕겠습니다. 기후 분야 ODA 확대, 글로벌 녹색 성장 연구소의 그린 뉴딜 펀드 신탁 기금 설립 등 개발도상국의 재원 마련과 역량 강화에 함께할 것입니다.
Denmark's prime minister affirmed that global partnership is the foundation for a solid climate change response. She said the time has come to have innovative climate change solutions, adding that Denmark plans to continue to work closely with South Korea.
We are now on the road to COP26. Now is the time to showcase new green solutions and scale them. Let's share experiences and learn from each other. and act now for our green future together.
Colombia, despite being a country that contributes less than 1% of the world's CO2 emissions every year, said it's willing to contribute by achieving carbon neutrality.
Colombia is making a big bet, a historical bet. We want to reach by 2030 a reduction of 51% in our CO2 emissions. And we have committed ourselves to reach by 2050 carbon neutrality.
The South American country pledged to make efforts through electric vehicles, renewable energy transition, and clean mobility. The president of the European Commission announced the EU's ambition to be the first carbon-neutral continent by 2050.
The 2020s is the make or break decade. And that's why Europe has committed to reduce our emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels.
She praised President Moon for his plan to update the NDC ahead of COP26, saying it would inspire South Korea's international partners. The U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry emphasized that countries should step up their ambitions to reduce the Earth's temperature by 1.5 degrees and praised South Korea for joining such efforts. He also revealed the steps his country would take to support developing countries in responding to climate change.
So we will double our public climate finance to developing countries by 2024 or sooner. We will work to achieve the 100 billion. And in addition, we are working with the private sector to bring literally trillions of dollars to the table now for investment in climate-related initiatives.
Wrapping up the P4G Seoul Summit, President Moon said he hoped it served as an opportunity to expand global cooperation to ensure a coordinated response to the climate crisis. Hongyu, Arirang News.
Having successfully hosted the P4G Seoul Summit, South Korea has taken center stage in global summit diplomacy by highlighting issues like climate change and sustainable growth. Through virtual meetings, though virtual meetings may not completely replace in-person forums, the P4G Seoul Summit highlighted new ways of hosting a global summit during a pandemic. Yoon Jung-min has more.
This year's P4G Seoul Summit marked the first ever multilateral climate summit to be hosted by South Korea, becoming the first Asian country to use this platform to raise awareness of climate issues since the summit first kicked off in Denmark in 2018. And due to the pandemic, the summit brought together people from around the world virtually, including figures from governments, international organizations, and the private sector. Though virtual meetings may not have been able to completely replace in-person forums, the P4G Seoul Summit highlighted new ways of hosting a global summit during a pandemic.
More and more leaders can participate in the meeting without the physical barriers. So we can create the various programs. We can create the innovative programs.
The summit takes on extra significance because this is the first year the Paris Agreement will be implemented and because it was held ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference known as the COP26, slated for November in Glasgow. It's also another high-level multilateral climate forum bringing nations together following on from the virtual Leaders Summit on Climate in April, which was led by U.S. President Joe Biden.
Then this P4G Summit meeting is well situated to make some bridges, and also bringing more attention from other summit leaders who might not have attended in the climate summit meeting by the United States. Or we can also make sure that the COP26 meeting will reflect all these current concerns.
During the summit, South Korea displayed state-of-the-art technology through augmented reality and advanced media, using video mapping technology to produce hologram-like images of nature and endangered animals. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Turning to COVID-19, South Korea now has more than 5.4 million people who have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and health authorities are gradually easing some of the social distancing restrictions for those who are vaccinated beginning today. For more, we have our Choi Won-jung on the line for us. Won-jung, tell us more about these incentives.
Morning, Mo-kyun. South Korea's health authorities will provide some incentives for those who've been vaccinated. Starting on Tuesday, people in South Korea who've had their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine can meet up for gatherings with immediate family members beyond the current limit of 8 people. That means if 5 people in a family have received their first doses, up to 13 family members can meet up. At nursing homes, face-to-face visits are allowed if either the patient or visitor has completed their vaccination. The authorities are also giving some discounts on tickets to national parks and a few other public facilities. Plus, starting Tuesday, centers for senior citizens will open their doors for those who already had their jabs.
Now, Won-jung, along with Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines, we heard that there will be new COVID-19 vaccines introduced for the first time in South Korea this week. Tell us about the new options.
Morgan, the first batch of Moderna COVID-19 vaccine will arrive in South Korea today, one day later than scheduled. The authorities said Tuesday that more than 55,000 doses from Moderna will touch down in Incheon this afternoon around 2 p.m. Starting the middle of June, medical workers under 30 will be eligible for the Moderna vaccine. Johnson & Johnson Janssen vaccine will also arrive in Seoul on a South Korean aircraft this Saturday. Over 1 million doses of vaccine will be available for reservists, members of civil defense, and those related to the country's defense and foreign affairs over the age of 30. Now, the first-come, first-served reservation already kicked off early Tuesday morning, but actual inoculation will take place on June 10th.
Won-jung, can you also tell us about the daily COVID-19 situation here in South Korea?
Sure. So as of Tuesday, more than 5.7 million people in South Korea have received their first dose of COVID-19 vaccines. Now, that's over 11% of the population. And vaccine batches like Moderna and Janssen are set to arrive. And meanwhile, the authorities reported 459 cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday, staying in the 400s for the third day in a row. Now, all but 10 were locally transmitted. The nation's total number of cases now stands at over 140,000. That's all I have for you right now. I'll be back for a later newscast. Back to you.
Thank you, Won-jung. We appreciate it. Now, up until now, COVID-19 variants have been labeled with confusing and hard to remember alphanumeric names. However, they are now being renamed with letters of the Greek alphabet in a bid to simplify discussion and pronunciation while avoiding potential stigma. Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
The South African variant of COVID-19 went by multiple names, including B1341, 501YV2, and 20H501YV2. Names all too complicated to remember and say. At the same time, naming each variant after where it originated can damage the reputation of the place in question. Which is why the WHO on Monday revealed the new names using the Greek alphabet according to the order of their detection. So far, the 4 COVID-19 variants considered strains of concern by the WHO will now be known using the Greek alphabet. As the UK variant was the first to be detected, it will be given the first letter, Alpha, while the South Africa, Brazil, and India variants will be named Beta, Gamma, and Delta, respectively. The decision comes after months of deliberations, where experts also considered using the names of Greek gods or invented pseudo-classical names. However, those ideas were shot down, as many were already brands, companies, or alien names. Meanwhile, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, during the agency's annual ministerial assembly on Monday, said the WHO is facing a serious challenge to maintain its COVID-19 response at the current level, and he called for more ambitious reforms. Health ministers also called for reforms to strengthen the capacity of both the WHO and their respective countries to contain new viruses in the future. Under a resolution submitted by the EU and adopted by consensus, member states will lead the reforms through a year-long process. Ministers from the WHO's 194 member states will also meet in November to decide whether to launch negotiations on a pandemic treaty. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, despite the bluster from Pyongyang, the U.S. insists it remains firmly committed to diplomacy with North Korea. The response by the State Department Monday came some 24 hours after the North slammed a U.S. decision to lift all restrictions on South Korean missiles. It said they are aware of North's criticism, but stressed the Biden administration's new North Korea policy calls for a calibrated and practical approach to ensure the security of the U.S., its allies, and deployed forces. South Korean and Hungarian officials have inaugurated a memorial in Budapest that commemorates the 28 people, most of whom were Korean, that drowned in the Danube River 2 years ago. Located where the boating disaster occurred, the vice foreign ministers of the two countries on Monday pulled off a white ribbon draped around the memorial. The South Korean official urged his counterpart to ensure the judicial process related to the incident is conducted in a fair and prompt manner. The disaster occurred on May 29, 2019, when the Viking Sign cruise boat slammed into a smaller tourist boat carrying 33 South Koreans. In sports, four-time Grand Slam tennis champion Naomi Osaka has withdrawn from the French Open. Making the announcement on Twitter on Monday, the 23-year-old Japanese tennis player officially pulled out of the competition and will take a break from tennis due to long bouts of depression. This comes after Osaka was fined $15,000 for skipping the press conference after her first round win at the clay tournament in Paris. In her statement on Twitter, she also brought up she has been dealing with depression since 2019 U.S. Open. Meanwhile, French Tennis Federation president said on Monday that the organization felt sorry and sad for her and wished her the best and a quick recovery.
Welcome. It's time for The World Now, bringing you some of the most interesting news from around the globe. I'm Ji-young. Many countries are striving to halt declining birth rates, and the world's most populous nation is no exception. China will now allow married couples to have up to 3 children, marking a departure from its previous 2-child limit. But after the announcement on Monday, critics say that this policy shift is in fact not enough to turn the nation's birth rate around.
Well, in 2015, so 5 or 6 years ago, the government already relaxed the family planning policy and to allow couples to have 2 children. The result has been pretty disappointing because in most cases, in most cities, young couples, when they get married, they plan for having one child or no children at all.
He added real incentives are needed as financial pressure are already huge. For nearly 40 years, the Chinese government imposed a one-child policy, which was eased amid concerns about an aging workforce. According to a recent Chinese census, the country's population grew at its slowest pace since the 1950s during the last 10 years to 1.41 billion. Also last year, the birth rate was recorded at just 1.3 children per woman, the same level as aging societies, including Japan and Italy. For those of you tuning in from Toronto, you might be wondering where summer is. But Mother Nature had other plans because the calendar says it's June and yet it snowed in Toronto. According to Environment Canada, Toronto had presumably the coldest May 28th recorded in its history. 3 days before June, the city woke up to chilly temperature with wet snow, freezing rain, and even ice pellets. The daytime high only made it up to 4 degrees Celsius. The Weather Network said the weather was due to a low pressure system tracked in southern Ontario, adding that this setup would be quite normal in the winter. Life wasn't easy from the start for a baby elephant, Kanisa, whose name means sunshine in Songhai language. She's a rare albino elephant who is pink in color with blonde tail hairs. At 4 months old, she was caught in a poacher's snare and trapped for 4 days in South Africa's Kruger National Park.
Kanisa was found in a snare, and the snare was actually cutting through her mouth, behind her ears, and she had really ugly wounds. So when she came in, she was totally dehydrated and severely injured.
The baby elephant was later transferred to a rehabilitation facility where she now lives with a herd of elephants. The founder says it's just amazing how she actually adapts to a situation. She also said snaring is on the rise due to human overpopulation as people set snares to poach game for food or to sell.
Good morning. The rain has finally let up and skies are clearing in the central regions. Top temperatures will be a couple degrees higher today across country, and it's going to be even hotter tomorrow before nationwide rain brings cooler air on Thursday. But for today, strong sunshine continues to be down in southern regions with very high UV rays, so don't forget your sun protective items. Meanwhile, northern parts of central regions where it rained this morning will be seeing more clouds than sunshine today. Checking on today's highs now, Seoul will make it to 25 degrees. Daegu and Gwangju will be topping out at 30 degrees Celsius under lots of sunshine. Plus, we'll have normal to good air quality nationwide. But starting Friday, we are looking at nothing but sunshine here in the capital. And temperatures will also rise to upper 20s from next week, feeling more like summer. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
That will do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back at noon Korea time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching and goodbye.